So there is a very different statute of limitations on this depending on the state. So make sure you check into what the rules are in your own state or the state that the debt originated in. But when you accrue debt, first whatever it is, and the debt becomes something that is defaulted on and you owe the money on it, but you have not paid in a certain amount of time, the debt maybe was half forgiven and part of it was set aside, whatever it is, there are different statute of limitations on old debt. Old debt also can come in the form of, oh, someone passed away, or maybe, you know, your ex got into this debt situation, and collection companies will try to get the money however they can. You don't know your rights, and so you make a payment. If you make a payment on debt that is beyond the statute of limitations in age, it restarts the clock, and suddenly the statute of limitations on that is gone. Say you had a ticket. After a certain amount of time, that comes off of your driving record, you know, whatever the ticket was. Say you got a speeding ticket, a DUI, whatever it is. After a certain amount of time, that mark on your character, as it were, as a driver, can get set aside because it's been long enough and you've been good enough, you haven't made any more mistakes, that will not hold that against you. The same thing can happen with debt, but if you make any kind of payment toward the debt once that has happened, it's like it's right back there. It's like getting that speeding ticket got removed off your record, but you said, oh wait, oh I remember that, and it got suddenly put back on again. And now the statute of limitations, the length of time to get to that, restarts. And you have to wait all that time all over again. Do not make a payment on really old debt, and do not make a payment on debt that's not yours. Your debt, when you're married to someone and they are in debt, you guys share debt now. But say you get a divorce. During the divorce proceedings, the judge says, here's how much of the debt you need to pay up. You pay up. You do your part, as it were. You're divorced. You're done. You think. And then later on, some collection person calls you. You do not owe a cent. The court decided what you owed. What part of the debt was yours. You don't owe them anything. Don't pay it, because once you start paying it, then your name's on it, and now, yeah, they do expect payments. You are not responsible for someone else's debt. There are many states where if someone passes away, not all debt is transferable to the people who inherit the property, or the debt of the parent doesn't transfer down to the child. And in many situations, debt has these very clear boundaries, but you don't know them. So then you just pay the collection agency because you think you have to, and you don't realize you don't have to. You don't have to. I just want that to be really clear. You have a choice. You have rights. They hound after you because they want money, not because it's ethical. There are rules and boundaries about preying upon the oppressed when it comes to finances. If you are struggling financially and you are buried under some debt, there are programs to help when the debt is too big and to forgive part of the debt. There are options for consolidating a bunch of high interest things into one smaller, lower interest thing. Although please make sure you do it with a bank that's FDIC insured, because I've seen some offer like scammy personal loans and they're not even insured. So just be careful. Your interest rate is, set in stone. You are protected. Your money will be protected. You're actually investing into yourself. But that being said, there are options. But debt feels so huge and so powerful that it feels like you can't get out of it. But in reality, we're kind of automatically assumed to consent to financial systems when we enter into adulthood. Whether we necessarily want to or not, financial systems are global. even if a country said, you know what, screw finances, we want to start a whole new system and do it our own way, that would only be one country. That wouldn't be in any way effective for the rest of the world. So we're kind of forced into it, which means it is unethical for people to not have access to the financial market, to credit, to savings, to banking. And yet there are people who feel like they don't. And part of that is systemic, part of that is classism, part of that is marginalizing groups. Like, there's a whole philosophical conversation to be had on it, but I just want you to know that from a legal perspective, from a financial perspective, if you are someone who is just being destroyed by debt, there are options, there are ways to alleviate that pressure, and there's even forgiveness. If you have a, say, subsidized or even unsubsidized loan through the government for your student loans, at a certain point, if you've just never been able to get out of poverty, there are statute of limitations on those loans. There's requirements, absolutely. And it should be the expectation that you truly would try your hardest to pay back whatever you got as a loan. Obviously, that's the goal. But it's a little inconceivable that everyone will be able to do that when the poorest people don't even make a livable wage. So how would it be possible in a realistic sense for them to be able to do that when the system itself is set up for them to fail? You can't expect a loan to be just as easy and simple and straightforward of a thing for a person who's living in absolute destitution as a person who owns multiple rental properties or a business or whatever it is. There's a difference in privilege, and the financial privilege of being able to say, yeah, absolutely, no problem, I can pay this back anytime I feel like it. You know what, I might even leave this around for a while because the financing makes my credit score go up. Versus someone who's like, yeah, if I try to pay that, then my kids don't eat. There's a huge disparity. So please look up your state, because debt has rules, and some of those rules can work in your favor. Even if you're poor, even if you're marginalized, please, please take the time to look it up. And I know that's scary. I know it's daunting to think, yeah, but what if I look it up and I have no options? That's a horribly depressing place to be in. But don't sabotage your ability to maybe find something you could use, an opportunity, a help of some kind, because you're scared it won't be there. You're guaranteed to not get help if you don't look for it. There's a chance you might not get help if you look for it. A chance is better than nothing. Do not think that just because you live in such deep poverty that you have no right. I don't know if people know this, but in accounting, there is a code of ethics. It's not the same as the Hippocratic Oath, the doctors take, but there is an actual, oath taking that goes on for accounting. And not all financial sectors have that. And I personally think that they should, but having a set standard of ethics puts an accountant at a unique position, because on the one hand, there's a massive conflict of interest. You get paid by a company to come make sure that they don't get audited. So you're encouraged, because you're getting paid by them, to do the bare minimum to make sure they don't get audited, while not looking too deeply into their loopholes. And yet at the same time, there's a unique position of authority to say, hey, this is not appropriate. You need to adjust and do something that's more moral, that's more good. And because you are the accountant, and because they need you to do their books, they are more receptive to hearing that than they would be from pretty much anyone else, unless it was the IRS perhaps. But even the IRS usually takes a grand gesture statement oh yeah, we're gonna make these changes for sure. We even have a goal of a deadline like 5 years from now. The IRS pats them on the head and says, okay, cool, thanks. 5 years later, oh yeah, we didn't do any of that stuff. Sorry, we're gonna make a new grand statement. This time we just need 10 years. 5 years was too short. The IRS says, okay, I'll give you a second chance. 10 years later, yeah, they still haven't done it. But the IRS takes those statements. When you're an accountant, it's a little more black and white, even though almost nothing is black and white. Almost everything is shades of gray. But you're able to analyze data, and you're able to exaggerate the places where they're really doing something not correct, and you can have just this slight bit of influence. And I don't talk about it a lot, but it's a goal of mine to help influence finances to be less oppressive. I want there to be less wide of a gap between the highest amount of wealth and the lowest. And I want that with all my heart. If you are in the bottom of wealth, if you are in the bottom of wage earning, if you are in the bottom because you have so much debt that your net worth is negative, please know that there are options for debt. The financial systems aren't necessarily going to bring them up to you, unless it's in a way that also benefits them. But there are laws, there are rules, and you do matter. Your net worth is not an indication of your value.